Welcome to Let's Talk Assassin's Creed, your number one podcast for all things Assassin's Creed. Just wanted to give a massive shout out to Tahir Patel for this idea. Now he hit me up on Instagram with an idea of a spin-off series where we look to the Isu War with the humans, and how this could have been played out in a game form and how we could fully experience it. Now I looked at many ways they could do this. They could have structured it as a linear game from 1 to Rogue, or they could do a fully fleshed RPG open world experience first started in Unity that is currently happening in Valhalla. But I don't think something like that would really give out the heart and the emotions they would have felt in these sort of circumstances. So I came up with the idea of episodic titles. I took a look at Heavy Rain or other Quantum Dream titles like Detroit Become Human, and I imagined Assassin's Creed ways of doing this. Now, one big change would have to be dialogue choices, because further in the episode I will explain how the episodic formats could have been used to tell tales from the novels and the comic series, but you couldn't really add choice. You can't break the canon established in a novel. So how could they get around it? Well, the best way they could get around it is each chapter is a story, or two stories to make it more fleshed out, or 2 chapters, 1 story, a bit more fleshed out that way. And your interactions are just basically everything that happened in words, but the actions. So if, let's say we looked at the Cassandra from the Assassin's Creed Odyssey novel, if in the novel it said that she jumped off a cliff and assassinated Bob with a spear, in the game you would jump off a cliff and assassinate Bob with a spear, but it would feel fluid and natural. It's like playing a Telltale game, but removing all of the dialogue choices and just having the quick time events. Probably wouldn't work for how them games are built, but if you could do it smoother and fluider, it might work for Assassin's Creed. So let's take a look at the main idea for this episodic adventure, and that is the Isu War. Now my big inspiration for this is one of my all-time favourite PS4 games, Detroit Become Human. And Tahir Patel suggested Adam, Eve, and Isu and how the pieces of Eden were formed. And I came up with the idea of imagine playing an episodic format where you played Eve, how she led the humans in their rebellion and survival, and then Adam and his side of the war, and how maybe Adam enjoyed helping Eve and doing what Eve had suggested, but he maybe wanted more control, more reign in the rebellion. Maybe it was getting out of hand, and he wanted more structure. And then we could have a third side where we follow one Isu scientist who builds certain pieces of Eden and how they affect the war. This will also be really good to see uncharted territories from the Assassin's Creed lore, because we know now how some of these pieces of Eden work, but this would be a good way to show them in action in a full war scenario, because we have the Shroud of Eden and the Sword of Eden that we see in gameplay a bit, but imagine them being used in a full-scale war scenario. Now as the game plays out, you'll follow maybe 4 missions as Eve, 4 missions as Adam, and 4 missions of the Isu, but every so often these missions will merge into one, giving you this whole sense of everything coming together and joining to make one big conclusion that blows you away. Now these games would be quite short, in my eyes, and I'll call them more interactive media or episodic versions, and I would logistically charge them if I made these very cheap, maybe about 15 to 20 English pounds, because I couldn't see these games being fully fleshed out to be full priced as the ones we have now. And now another great way of doing this episodic format was suggested to me by G Assassin. He suggested that we could have used the Helix store that we see in Unity and pick some of the memories, like the Jazz Age. We could use something like that as the HUD, as I would word it, or the interface for these episodic formats. You pick it, you play a short one that maybe lasts 2-3 hours, you enjoy that story. You then pick another one, 2 to 3 hours, you enjoy that story. And to me, this helps build out very cohesive lore-filled moments for all fans to enjoy. Because how Assassin's Creed works now, you get these amazing cutscenes and amazing gameplay moments that shock you in lore, but they are distilled with gameplay mechanics to keep you playing again. So if they give you a way of experiencing these lore-heavy moments, these jaw-dropping actions, but in a story format, I think it would work fantastic. Now, I did want to make this episode fully just about this idea for Isu, but it got me really happy to think about the potentials they could do out of the Isu side. And the biggest one that I've had a lot of conversations with fans about is Juno. The Juno arc was built up to be a phenomenal battle against the greatest villain in Assassin's Creed lore, and then it disappeared into the comics, and that's kind of bad. You can't take a story away from the games for the comics, but giving an episodic format, just as suggested in the Isu War playable area, you could then replay these stories. Charlotte Cruise's comics could be transferred into a fully fledged episodic format. You could play her from the start to the end and witness the entire Juno arc in all its glory. And the other major thing about this, it will help unite the fans that haven't had a chance yet to read the comics. And this way no longer will fans be, oh, I didn't know about that, I haven't read the comic. Or, I'm sorry, I didn't know that, I haven't read the book. This is a common theme in the Assassin's Creed community, and if you give them a chance to experience these stories in episodic format, all the fan base will be able to unite, knowing some of these lore and jaw-dropping moments because they've either played it for episodic titles or they've read it. Now, I want to swing back to the Isu War because this is what jogged this whole episodic idea, and it got me thinking more and more and more about how can you make this canon. We know that if you follow the books, if you follow the novels in episodic format, they have a set way of becoming truly canon. You can't really change it, and you don't really need to change it. So how could we make the Isu War canon? And to be honest, I didn't know at first. I will admit I was stumped how you could make this sort of idea push back, seeing as the Animus does have issues pushing memories past a certain date. And then I thought, what if we didn't have memories? What if the way these episodic titles worked in the Helix server was through pieces of Eden themselves? Maybe a data disk, maybe one of those disks from Revelations, or maybe the Isu found a way to archive information, and it's this archive we're tapping in. Now we know in Odyssey's DLC, Fate of Atlantis, we could witness a simulation of an Isu era from Poseidon, Hades, and Persephone. And to me, this pushed the Animus further back in time than it's actually reached, because these areas would have happened long before the Toba catastrophe and long before humans repopulate the Earth. So if we were able to do this, then we could push the boundaries of the lore. Maybe we could get episodic titles that tell the birth of the Isu themselves, how the Isu rose to power. Now I know it's nice to have more mystery behind the Isu, but I think some fleshed out moments would be amazing. We could have an arc based on Juno, her life, how she became vengeant against humans because of her father being killed by the slaves. You could have the moments from Odyssey where she turned humans into monsters, and then you could have the moment where she came back thinking she had succeeded, only to be killed at the final hurdle. And this would be amazing to see, and we could see other stories from other point of view. And stuff we could also see that I think a lot of fans would enjoy is what happened to Desmond. Now we know Desmond died in 3, but what if behind the scenes of the games Desmond did a few little activities or side missions that weren't connected to the big game? Maybe his life growing up, maybe his life before being captured, or maybe a few missions between 1, the Ezio trilogy, and 3. And this could flesh out so many characters. What did Ezio do between Brotherhood and Revelations? What did Connor do after 3? What happened to Edward after 4? we know his story ends in the books, but not everyone's read the book. So what if we could play it? We could take everything that happened with Xiao Zhan in the Chronicles series and expand it. We could help her train with Ezio, and that training could linger on into this episodic title where we face the Templars and use all her training from Ezio, and it would feel so humble instead of like a side scroller where we see cutscenes of them fighting and then a movie. You know, to me, there is a lot more potential out there to expand the Assassin's Creed world and lore to new boundaries. Now, I would love to see these sort of things become mainline, and I know that would never work because the mainline games are so fleshed out and open worldly, it would probably not fall into place. But this could also give hope that when you have a mainline game and you have that drought between mainline and the next mainline, they could release an episodic title in between. Something short, maybe add it to a season pass, maybe charge £15 like I suggested, and that could tell a story between the events of that last game and the next game as a teaser. I think everyone would enjoy that. You know, Valhalla, you could play a story after what happened with Ava, and then right at the end, it could fade to black, and that could be a teaser of what's happening next. That hypes a lot of people to the potentials of coming next. Now, I do realise that as I'm going on, I have completely gone off topic, but to his point of view that he suggested opens the floodgates to one of the greatest moves for this Assassin's Creed franchise. Leaving it as an episodic title for the Isu War is perfect enough. It is a story that we all know from the lore from number 2 where we saw the Animus glitches, and we know it existed, but we don't know how it played out. But giving it an episodic format, we could see how it was played out. We could enjoy how it's played out. We could feel the emotions that Adam and Eve would have felt. And more importantly, we can get more insight into how a piece of Eden is made. And once we know how a piece of Eden is made, we can start speculating how to destroy a piece of Eden. And destroying a piece of Eden doesn't sound important off the bat, but destroying a piece of Eden could change how the games have worked, because we know we're collecting them, but what if we could destroy them? Now this is a short episode today because I'm using new software and it seems very temperamental. So I want to thank you all for listening, and next week's topic is a surprise, because I think you're going to enjoy what I'm going to discuss. So thank you all for tuning in, and I hope to see you all next time.